See you. Order. Well, I did not make the comment.
Bill is not about taking away rights. It is about giving opportunity.
Kia ora, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we wrap the week's current affairs with a panel of bloggers and opinion shapers. Joining me tonight, he's the editor of the Daily Blog Live, commentator and journalist Selwyn, and he is an author, a columnist and political commentator. Proof the revolution will be televised, blogger Trotter. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, first issue. If one dirty pipe can cause this much damage to our economy, are we too reliant on Fonterra, and has the government done enough? Issue 2, the second reading of the GCSB mass surveillance bill has passed. Have the Stevenson and Vance revelations helped? And issue 3 tonight, is it time for Taina Pora's case to be re-examined? Plus, we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off tonight with issue 1. Fonterra's unbelievably inept media management of their poisoned milk scandal has alerted us all to how fragile our economy's clean green brand really is. Selwyn, headline in the world's most read online newspaper, the British Mail Online, this week reads, New Zealand's green claims are pure manure. How have we gone from 100% pure to 100% purge?
Well, this is exactly what happens when you actually make pure New Zealand a brand as opposed to a reality. And every block has been in place over the last 5 years to try and actually make sure that agriculture has been able to screw this country down to maximise its profits. And the damage is being done all around. This thing with this dirty pipe, I mean, that just is mind-boggling. You know what's the worst thing I think about this is the cloak of secrecy that has been wrapped around Fonterra, where it doesn't even breathe to our government. I start to wonder, considering that the agriculture sector, Fonterra and all the farmers around that whole sector are the closest stakeholder groups that this particular government, the national-led government, has. The National Party is always relied on that sector to give it, one, the money, but also the power to actually push itself as a party out there. It almost is unbelievable that it would be in the dark from March on an issue as big as this through to August. Sure. I just don't, it doesn't bring reality kind of issues to me here.
Is it good enough that the Prime Minister and the head of Fonterra are sending late night texts to each other to check things out? I'm expecting a little bit more hands-on than late night texts.
Yeah, well, this is this whole thing, this cavalier attitude that we've seen with the Prime Minister's approach to the issues of national security, issues of public interest, issues relating to the economy of New Zealand here, and what we stand for, being comfortable with that. It's just not good enough, is it? Text exchanges.
Chris, the National Party are the political expression of the bankers and the farmers. This is their golden goose industry. Are the farming community going to judge National harshly if they don't hold Fonterra to account?
Oh, I think the comments from the Federated Farmers Chief make it pretty clear that heads will have to roll.
Right.
After all the milk powder settles, as it were. This really is a warning that we would be very, very unwise to ignore, or perhaps putting that a different way, to absorb and process and then do something about. Because the lackadaisical approach of Fonterra, not least to its public relations, as you rightly say, but to the whole idea that an emergency procedure must be in place. It must be rehearsed. I mean, this is what proper public relations departments do for a major multinational corporation. They say, if the worst comes to the worst, what do we do? What are the procedures? What do our chief executives, our chief financial officers, our scientists...
and they seem to have no plan in place.
They have a guy called Romano, who seems to spend more time making his hair look good than just about anything else as far as the public's concerned. You've got this guy on Campbell Live in an open neck shirt, rolling his eyes, and New Zealand's going, what?
Yeah.
This is your spokesperson?
They weren't even able to give a list of the products that shouldn't have
No.
been consumed on Campbell Live. You would have thought the first thing they would have is a list of the
Look,
bloody
you would have
products.
thought, as I say, that they had rehearsed this kind of worst case scenarios, because so much of New Zealand depends on its dairy industry, and so much depends on the world's faith in New Zealand's dairy industry, that human error being human error, problems are going to arise,
Sure.
but you must have the best possible response, not only worked out, but practiced, so that it all unfolds in a way where the world goes, well, that's unfortunate, but they seem to be on top of it.
Sure.
And that is not what has happened.
No. Selwyn, New Zealanders allow Fonterra to form a monopoly when they damage the entire brand of the nation. Are we getting a good enough return for allowing them to do that?
No, and there's many aspects to this too. One can be that we can learn from it, and that is diversification. There's a sense around diversification instead of self-reliance on particular one area of what this country can produce, and that debate is starting to show here. But I really, what Chris is talking about there is, a response to the public when something goes wrong is absolutely right. One of the things that seems to be an evidence here on why that is not too flash is because they do not have the ability to, I believe at this stage, accurately portray really what's gone on.
Right.
I think in some ways they have gone to the public at a time where they're thinking, we just really don't know whether or not there's a systemic problem here. I mean, if that's the case, this is a destructive thing.
Look, the other thing to say
And
is,
at the end of the day, it's little babies and everything that can suffer from this.
absolutely, but there was an item on television last night featuring a Massey University microbiologist. And
It's very
apparently, Massey's microbiology department is almost literally next door to Fonterra's research facilities, which makes sense, this hub idea.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that Fonterra let go an indeterminate
cuts,
number
et cetera,
of
et
its
cetera, yeah.
scientific staff.
Oh, really?
And this fellow, was clearly deeply concerned, not just that that had happened, because it meant that Fonterra had, in a sense, disarmed itself of the people it needs in a situation like this. But what he thought it reflected was a general contempt for the sciences among business and political leaders. And you can sort of understand this because neoliberalism is a whole series of heroic assumptions, like most economics.
Yeah. The rational individual.
Yeah. And science is different. Economists would like to think that their discipline was a science,
Well,
but it's
on
not.
that point, I think that there is a culture where science is a part of the research and development, that those that are sitting there trying to actually move a product perhaps into productivity, into return on that research and development period, start to then flick away the sciences. Now the message, rightfully what you were saying there from that scientist, that this is right across the road, saying you get your science right, you get your safety right, you've got a good product and you can sustain your benefits over a long period
Let's get
of
to
time.
the politics of it. Chris, $25 million cut from food safety management by this government, and Trade Minister Tim Grosser was telling Fonterra at field days in June that food security with China was being ignored. Have National provided the proper oversight of the industry?
National has taken the FTA that Labor negotiated with China for granted. It's a rip, shit and bust attitude, as it always is on the part of National Party and its business allies. And the editorial content in Xinhua News Agency, which is really the voice of the Chinese Communist Party, could not have made it clearer. China is saying, if you don't like the fact that you have an FTA with the world's largest, soon-to-be largest economy, that's just fine. Just let us know. We'll find someone else.
Yes.
That's what they were effectively saying to us. You idiots down there with your ideology, you lift your game or forget about it.
Final question to both of you. The RENA ran aground and highlighted our deregulated vulnerabilities, and Pike River mine tragedy was caused by our deregulation. Is one dirty Fonterra pipe another example of self-regulation gone wrong?
Well, possibly, but what it is certainly going to do is damage New Zealand's return on its investment that has gone on in agriculture for decades. And certainly what Chris is talking about there with China's response here, I think it's one way China can also send a signal back to New Zealand that they're not happy with where the New Zealand government has been placing it on security intelligence issues aligning to the United States.
Another self-regulation mutilation.
Well, yes, and the real worry is that this attitude, this she'll be right attitude exemplified in this scandal, if it ever allowed the biosecurity of New Zealand to fall to a level where we got an invasion of foot and mouth disease, then it'll all be over. You can just switch off the lights.
Thank you,
we've really got to take notice of this.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, panel. Moving on with our second issue tonight. The GCSB bill passed its second reading, but a filibuster by opposition parties has put the final passing off for a few weeks. While the mass surveillance bill was being rammed through the legislative process, more twists and turns in the Andrea Vance and John Stevenson spying cases, and fresh revelations that police even considered spying on Winston Peters' phone records in the wake of the Epsom teapot tapes. Chris, the claim by the government is that they didn't ask for Vance's records and that they were sent by mistake and couldn't even been opened. However, it turns out it was only because they couldn't open the files that the checks and balances kicked in. What is most disturbing to you about the entire Andrea Vance situation?
Oh, I mean, where to start? An attitude on the part of government which has been there for some time, as the teapot tapes response indicated, but which has clearly gotten a lot worse, that the rights of individuals, the freedom of the press, the general obligation of government to act within the law, a government of laws, not a government of men. These principles don't seem to have lodged at all in the brain of our Prime Minister. If they're introduced at all, they get a nod and then are shown the back door. And really, the Andrea Vance thing, I just find it frankly implausible that nowhere in any of those branches of government was a technician available of sufficient skill to turn those emails into something that could be read.
You can download a program to do that within 5 minutes.
Yeah, most people can.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I mean, I can't,
yeah.
but most people can. Maybe they're all as technologically deficient as I am in the government bureaucracy, but I hope not, and I suspect not.
Selwyn, NZDF says that any monitoring of a journalist was an inadvertent byproduct of American surveillance, yet under the new law, this kind of thing would be perfectly legal if carried out by the GCSB on behalf of the NZDF. What concerns you most about the John Stevenson case?
The vindictiveness about it. I think on a previous program, Chris spoke really eloquently about this, and certainly in a blog post on the Daily Blog relating to John Stevenson outlined all of this. John Stevenson was warned here in New Zealand by a very senior officer in the New Zealand Defence Forces that if he went back to Afghanistan, he would not get back to New Zealand. He would not get on a plane out. Now that obviously didn't occur. John Stevenson, very happy to say, is still alive. But he told me that himself. John Stevenson told me that when it occurred.
Me too.
And I think he was giving a bit of insurance around the place. And he went back, he did his job. Now there is a very, very, very dark cloud that is verging on threats to kill that seemed to be coming from our own commissioned officers. Like Chris said just before, where do you start? How do you respond to all of this grubby, miserable, evil detail? Sometimes you've got to stand back, and I'm sure the viewers there tonight, they'll be thinking there's so many legs to this. Sometimes you stand back and you observe the tapestry that's before you, and it's not a good one. I think New Zealand has changed to the point where it's going to take a decade of political and public will to return it to where it once was.
Chris, during the second reading this week of the GCSB bill, Chris Finlayson said the entire law society is wrong and that this law strengthens civil liberties, not weaken them. How can the law society, the entire law society, be so wrong with the considered opinion?
Well, Chris Finlayson is a very interesting study. I find the man quite repellent, and there's something cold and calculating and vicious about our Attorney General, excuse me, which worries me a great deal. I don't believe that the Law Society is wrong. I think he has been wheeled out because, for all his repellent qualities, he is a very cogent speaker. And the government has need of such people because this is a signally indefensible piece of legislation which every constitutionally sensitive part of New Zealand society has loudly proclaimed. Once again, to the complete indifference of the Prime Minister and his cabinet. You see it everywhere. You see it in relation to the GCSB legislation. You see it, as Selwyn said, in relation to the New Zealand Defence Force, their relationship with John Stevenson. You see it in the so-called Justice Minister, this almost Madame Defarge-like delight in seeing the guillotine come down on people's necks. I'm sure if she could make it real as opposed to figurative, she would probably give it her best shot. I mean, it's worrying, and as again someone said, the tapestry that you see as you step back is really quite frightening now.
Let's get into some of the detail of that tapestry. Selwyn, as soon as Key's Chief of Staff becomes involved in anything, normally sensible public servants seem to throw all concerns for civil rights out the window. The police did it by searching phone records of the Epsom Tea Party cameraman, and Parliamentary Services did it with Vance's swipe card, emails and phone records. Why does the Chief of Staff have this kind of power?
Oh, because they're central to the office of the Prime Minister. It's the most, you know, this is Heather Simpson in a male form.
Right.
We all know that the power that Heather Simpson had not only over her own cabinet people in the Labour-led governments of the 2000s, but certainly in many areas of influencing policy and the way it was implemented, and also the cultures within the beehive and how it interacts with every other democratic institution in this country. And this is what we have here. But the problems here are beyond just that too. Another very, very powerful area is the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, the DPMC. It's involved too. We've got, under John Key, it's almost every area of powerful office in this country that is wrapped within his control or within his reach seems to be embroiled in controversy. At a political event on early this week on Monday night, and they were political people, and I put it to them, how many people there knew a year ago what the GCSB was? About 10% did. 90% didn't know. And that's how it should be. Under John Key's watch, all of these things have become a household. Honestly, I just don't know which, you know, covering this type of thing, writing on it, all of us have done this. Where, like Chris said, where do you start? Sometimes you just got to dig in and then come out. It's like macro and micro.
Final question to both of you on this. What are to be made of these latest allegations by Winston?
Well, Winston loves to stir the pot, and I think he is making it very clear to John Key that that he's not going to be the easy lay that Peter Dunn was.
Yes.
Selwyn?
That's my final word.
We'll get into that a little bit later. Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3, the horror story of Taina Pora's 20-year imprisonment for a crime that many say he simply could not have committed. Could be the worst miscarriage of justice ever seen in New Zealand. Congratulations to Third Degree for refusing to let the story die. Selwyn, is this a case of police bullying a young brown male into a crime he didn't commit, and too much police ego to make an admission that they got it wrong?
Oh, yeah, it's a classic case of once a decision has been made and a course has been planned out, that it takes, well, it's impossible to actually change that trajectory. This young boy, I was reporting in South Auckland when that case went, when Susan Burdett was murdered. Even then, amongst not just journalists, but amongst police, there were a lot of questions around, are you people really sure you've got that? I remember being at the press conference after the convictions of Tina Pora, where Steve Rutherford, the head of the investigations into what became the Malcolm Rewa convictions, the serial rapist, where he called press to it and he said, I just remember Joseph Thompson, the Manukau serial rapist, had not that long before that being arrested and sentenced. And the police called that conference and they said, we have another serial rapist. When and details were coming out from that, and Rewa subsequently was arrested. When it came to pass that Rewa, his DNA was found on the body of Susan Burdett, then all of those concerns and confusion and doubt around the conviction of Tina Pora started to come to the surface for a lot of people. It just, at every angle, right from the start, it's almost like, in many cases, a totally different case, but it's like the Arthur Thomas case. It just doesn't go away. And I just got to give real credit to those people, like on Māori TV, certainly the New Zealand Herald's work, and what Eugene Bigham and Paula Penfold have been doing at TV3 to keep it there and to get a result that's right for the person in the country.
Chris, Judith Collins says her hands are tied, but that didn't stop her moving heaven and earth to stymie the Bain compensation. Surely the time is now to re-look at this terribly questionable conviction.
What I believe is required in this case, as it was in the case of Arthur Allen Thomas, is for the leader of the country, our equivalent of a king, to exercise the prerogative of mercy and to, in effect, grant a pardon. Now, John Key doesn't have the constitutional power to do that, neither did Rob Muldoon, but he has the political authority to make sure that such a thing occurs. And it really does require that level of intervention, because our system, our legal system, sets the bar so high for a court of appeal that it's extremely difficult to get a decision overturned. I mean, the Court of Appeal can look at the judges summing up, it can look at whether evidence was properly adduced or not, but it can't, in a sense, review the whole case. I think John Key could earn huge amounts of political credit, if he was to set in motion the same sort of process that occurred in Arthur Allen Thomas's case, and if he was to instruct his competitor, Ms. Collins, to set up that review body that they have in the United Kingdom and in some of the states of the US.
Final question to both of you on this. What happened to the concept of preferring to let 10 guilty people walk free to prevent one innocent person going to jail? Have we become so irrationally angry at crime that rational debate has just left justice? What's happened?
Well, I think we would rather see 10 people who were innocent sent to jail than let one obviously guilty person go free. I think we have completely inverted that situation. And you know, I mean, that's happened in my lifetime. I remember Dr. Martin Finlay, Attorney General under Norman Kirk, who once outraged virtually the entire country when he said, you know, you should never build a prison that is escape-proof. Every prisoner should have in the back of his mind the idea that if I really try, I can get out of this place. Because otherwise, he said, it crushes the human spirit. Now, where have those politicians gone?
I think a lot of it too is the pressure on police officers to get a result. Remember, every 6 months, every year, we get statistics come out. There's a political squeeze on the police to actually get a result in these cases. There's pressure inside, there's expectation in the public, and all of that kind of leads in some cases to a bad result. But one would hope that the assurances that are coming out of the cops, that their processes and their ability to investigate have improved over the years. If that's the case, we'll do something right about it right now.
Let's wrap the show on a final word. Chris, your final word this week is?
Oh, I'm just enjoying the spectacle of Julian Assange's candidacy for the not the United States, the Commonwealth of Australia's Senate, which apparently is gaining legs. The conundrum for a government of Australia, if Julian Assange is elected senator and holds the balance of power, just how they would respond to the British and Swedish and American governments would just be so much fun to watch.
Fantastic.
So, in your final word?
Well, it's on balances of power.
Yeah.
I think that, viewers, that tonight, if they look at what's going on between Winston Peters and John Key, over all of Winston Peters' claims that his text or his phone records and the Bradley Ambrose sting, the teapot thing, were all taken by the police, and that the Prime Minister was getting all that information back. I think, once again, you look back and you think, what's Peters really trying to say here? His audience is John Key and his merry men, and he's saying, you want me after this next election? You need me? This is what you're going to get.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Selwyn. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word. Last week, John Key went on to More FM and breathlessly informed them that there were Al-Qaeda-trained terrorists living amongst us. With all due respect to Cyan Gazza in the Morning Madhouse Breakfast Show, they aren't really equipped to negate terrorist allegations by the Prime Minister, are they? I dare Mr. Key to make those allegations on Radio New Zealand with Kim Hill. What's after the More FM terrorist revelations? Security chat with Vici on Sports Talk, or the finer points of international intelligence imperatives with Dopey, Sleepy and Doc on 7 Sharp? Key is making ridiculous scaremongering claims about terrorists via soft media to bypass critical media to try and convince Middle New Zealand that the GCSB bill isn't the vast erosion of our rights and the beginnings of the mass surveillance state that it really is. This is media manipulation at its very best. Key is being so laid back and casual about all of this, he may as well do these interviews on his back and refer to the GCSB as got caught spying, bro. It's not the beginning of mass surveillance. Oh no, it's about terrorists, drug dealers and people smugglers. It's like the more Key rips up our civil liberties, the more the sleepy hobbits of New Zealand seem to love him. We are a nation of political sadomasochists. There seems to be a dark streak of anti-intellectualism in our shaky isles that embraces Key's nonchalant ignorance with the passion of a junkie to their dealer. This is New Zealand 2013, and the book burners have taken over the library. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.